Nowadays, the curtain of kayfabe has been lifted from pro wrestling as more and more wrestlers come out about backstage stories. This is Wrestling Up, and here are the wildest things said on Broken Skull Sessions with Steve Austin. Before we get into the rest of the video, make sure you subscribe to Wrestling Up and turn on all notifications to stay up to date with everything in the world of pro wrestling. The most obvious thing that came out of Bret's podcast with Stone Cold was how much he hated Goldberg and how he blamed Goldberg for ending his career with the stiff kick that gave him a concussion. Goldberg to me was one of the most unprofessional wrestlers there was in the business. I mean, for Bill to be in the Hall of Fame, he hurt everyone he ever worked with. You might as well wrestle a real gorilla. He was the most dangerous guy to work with. I remember Kurt Hennig being in pain all the time from the matches they had, even when I worked with Bill. The last thing I said to Bill before we went out to have that match that ended my career was, "Bill, you can do whatever you want out there. Just don't hurt me." Everyone knows that Bobby Lashley is one of the toughest men. He did MMA for Bellator, winning multiple fights. However, anyone when confronted with guns will not be able to naturally start using their fighting skills. Lashley was the same when a bank robbery stole away a large part of his life and derailed any hopes of going to the Olympics. I go inside to get some money out of the ATM and then I go into the line. As soon as I get into the line, it's like bam bam, and when I first heard it, all the ladies that were in the round part were facing the door, so they were like screaming and dropping down. I was like, I turned, and when I turned, I later found out because I saw this video, the bullet just went ring over my face. The guy, when he kicked open the door, I don't know if it was a reflex and he shot, or if he really wanted to shoot. I don't know what it was, but he kicked open the door and he's boom. He's going. When he did that, I just took a dive down to the ground. As soon as I hit the ground, it was like thud. It was just pure panic. I was shaking, but I was like almost feel like pushing myself through the concrete, like trying to disappear and be calm. And then I heard another shot. I moved forward a little bit. I was like, no, don't move. Relax, relax, relax. Unfortunately, when he had gotten up, you look down to find his knee was swollen from hitting the ground. He needed surgery for a torn meniscus, thereby ending his shot at the Olympics. The Undertaker was out of character during his interview with Stone Cold, where he mentioned a long plane ride where Ric Flair challenged him to a drinking contest. After the fact, Taker laid Flair out on the middle row of seats fast asleep, while he kept drinking. Austin talked about the legendary chops of Flair and said many were unwilling to take them. Flair revealed two of the best of all time, Bret Hart and The Undertaker, hated the chops the most. Bret and Taker were the two worst. Taker would tell me, "You've got three." He's got that big chest, which is like a sounding board, but Bret hated it. We were in San Antonio one night and Bret goes, "I hate this, but I promise you, I read an article the other day and Bret said if I chopped him again, he was going to knock me out." That conversation never took place, but it was my whole offense. Even as a heel, my offense was the chop, a knee drop. These guys that had back problems who worked with me, I said it wasn't for me giving them bumps. Despite the chops, Flair and Taker faced at WrestleMania 18, as Rick revealed it was Taker who wanted that match. Mick Foley was one of the greatest of all time in WWE, but at a time Vince McMahon was not convinced by his appearance and was not going to sign him. Jim Ross recalled the story. "I go to Vince and say I want to hire Mick Foley. 'Oh no, JR, we're not doing that. I'm gonna go along with you on most of these things, but not that one.' He says, 'Okay, here's the deal. You hire him because I want you to know what it feels like to have your heart broken by a talent that you have great belief in. Just prepare for that. It'll be a great lesson for you to learn, so hire him." On his Broken Skull Sessions appearance, Foley revealed Ross and Undertaker were key to getting him hired. I've never had this confirmed, but I have to believe Undertaker played a role in convincing Vince McMahon because he was my first opponent out of the gate. I show up in Milwaukee for our first pay-per-view, and Taker starts laying out that match. and I think what he's telling me is I'm winning this match. And I've got to the back and, you mean like I win? Yeah, I have to feel the power that Taker was. He wanted to do business. When Lesnar faced Angle at WrestleMania 19, Lesnar botched a shooting star press, concussing and almost paralyzing himself. During his appearance on Broken Skull Sessions, Angle talked about that moment. He was going across the ring earlier. You see what he does? He second guesses himself. There is a little pause right before he goes, ugh, I thought he broke his neck. I was surprised that he kicked out. He didn't even know where he was. Right then, I was like, what are we going to do? He just missed the finish. And I can hear F5 because he's not going to be able to do the moonsault again. He's out of it. He's telling me he thinks he can do it again, and he kicks me in the gut and F5. Angle even recalled the backstage wrestling match with Lesnar. Well, I had a lot of respect for Brock. When he came in, you know, the boys were joking with him, telling Brock, hey, you're not an Olympic gold medalist, you're just an NCAA champion, you know? How would you do against Kurt? And Brock said I would whip his butt. So now the pressure's on me. I gotta go confront Brock and say, what would happen if you and I wrestled? So I knew the size difference, but what I had was experience and positioning, so I would just stay patient. When we had the match, it was really close. I never admitted to kicking his butt and all that. I scored a takedown on him, and that was the end of it. It was one takedown. In a separate interview, Angle confirmed he had taken Lesnar down on the rope 7 to 8 times, and he had taken him down properly only once. When it came time for Kane to unmask in WWE, he had to do away with his long hair, something his spouse was upset about. I actually was a little nervous though, because I hadn't told my wife about this, and my wife loved my long hair, and I wanted her to see it and be shocked just like everybody else, and she was. So when I talked to her after the match, that didn't go very well. On top of that, the WWE crew and Vince thought it was a good look for him to just have hair on the back of his head, and they get about halfway through and Bruce Pritchard goes, stop, I need to show Vince. I should have said right then, keep going. And of course, in the heat of the moment, I'm like, oh yeah, this is going to be awesome. And then yeah, I'm sitting there like, wait a second, I gotta go to like Outback with this? I gotta pick my kids up at school. Despite being a top star in WWE, in 2013, Sasha Banks thought she'd be released. I'm on the chopping block, and I cannot get fired from this place that I grew up watching my whole life. She started to panic and was helped by Xavier Woods and Tyler Breeze to come up with the legit boss persona, which was largely inspired by Sasha's cousin Snoop Dogg. WWE officials didn't even like it, but Dusty Rhodes did, and his support got her on the card. She revealed on Broken Skull Sessions that she wanted to leave WWE. She asked Mr. McMahon whether she could, and the chairman refused, giving her time to think about it. One of the hardest things that I had to do was ask to leave WWE. Vince was like, no. He said no. He said, I'm gonna give you 30 days to think about it, and it took more than 30 days. This place can definitely get to you. It's hard. She ended up staying. Sasha was also afraid of Hell in a Cell matches and was nervous when she found out she'd be in the main event. But you have to know this match is scary, especially for a woman, someone who is small in my stature. I was honestly super nervous because I didn't know we were going to main event till the night before. Charlotte called me, and she told me, and it just made me shook. It made me second guess myself. Is what I have in my mind good enough to be the main event? When Seth Rollins came to WWE, he did not get the experience that he had expected. He was told to train with Tom Pritchard, who didn't know who he was. He called the training area a piece of shit warehouse in the middle of nowhere. This was before WWE had a performance center. He had been the ROH champion only weeks before, and when he saw the conditions, he had second thoughts. However, that was not all that he hated in WWE. Rollins was in a feud with The Fiend where he faced him in a Hell in a Cell match, as the match oddly enough ended via disqualification. Out front, Rollins would not say a word and defend WWE's booking, but he was furious behind the scenes. I put his positive spin on it now that I can look back on it a year and a half later, but at the time I came through that curtain and I was ready to strangle Vince McMahon. I'm not kidding you. Tyson Kidd was there to hold me back. Dude, I stared right into Vince's eyes. You know where he sits in that chair over there? I looked at him, he looked at me, we didn't say a single word to each other, and he walked out. The match was one of the most criticized, and rightfully so. The fans hated it, and it turned a babyface Rollins into a heel. The next next day I went into Vince's office. I was much calmer and I said, let's talk about this. We need to figure out what we're doing here because that can't happen again. It was civil, but it took me a night. I was ready to go, man. If somebody wasn't there making sure I was okay, my temper, the adrenaline, you know. When he was on Broken Skull Sessions, Chris Jericho opened up about how, when he was leaving WCW, he was invited to Vince McMahon's house. Only later would Jericho realize the whole meeting had been a test by Vince to see if Jericho would talk about it to others. Since he didn't, it turned out Jericho was someone Vince could trust. Jericho and Vince were friends after that, but sometimes, as it turned out, Jericho would get himself into trouble. On the podcast, he talked about how he once got into trouble after he used the F word after SmackDown went off the air. And in those days, as you know, we did it countless times. You grab the microphone and you would say a promo for the fans after the show was done. You'd always leave them with something extra. So I grabbed the mic and I remember the crowd was going crazy and it was such a great moment that I just say that and I look over at Jerry Lawler and he was like, yep, you said it. You just said the F word. Probably nobody cared, but this is WWE. I go back and Vince is standing there. Come here, pal. And like a moron, I go, didn't you hear what I said out there? What did you say? Nothing. What did you say? I said the best effing crowd. He was like, ugh, Jericho. And he walked out and I stood there like, no. Jericho also said the only reason he joined WWE was because he wanted to work with Vince. Prompted by the fact that I wanted to work for Vince, oh yeah, always having this plan in mind, keep in mind. I grew up in Winnipeg. We didn't have WCW there. We didn't really have NWA. I wanted to be the WWE Intercontinental Champion. I wanted to work for Vince McMahon. I wanted to work in Madison Square Garden where my father played hockey, and I remember watching him as a little kid. Unfortunately, WWE wasn't calling me at the time, but WCW did. And I thought, if I could go there, maybe I'll become a big star and they'll take me. Jericho and McMahon share a good relationship, which is why Vince allowed Chris to appear on Stone Cold's podcast even when he was working for AEW. Seth Rollins also talked about Dean Ambrose and Randy Orton during his appearance on Broken Skull Sessions. While there, he talked about how Orton was furious with the backstage attack that Ambrose launched on Orton, where he went for the Viper's knees. He was so angry with Dean that he threatened to put a hit on Ambrose. Thankfully, Triple H defused the situation. I jump up on Randy, who's a big dude. I get on his back, and before he has any time to think, Ambrose is there with the chop block. It's a nice chop block. It's as safe as they come. But you feel somebody come low when you've got somebody on your head and it's panic time. We come back to Gorilla and Randy's hot. He's hot, he's yelling, he's basically saying he's gonna put a hit on Ambrose. I remember he leaves Gorilla and we're all just like, laughing. Hunter's like, don't worry about it. These Shields attack were apparently never planned out, and the group used to call it on the fly all the time. And these were the wildest things said on the Broken Skull Sessions with Steve Austin. I hope you're all having a great day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.